Okay, now we're going to try and get into these four kings of Daniel. We want to do an explanation as to who they are. We're beginning to see all of these pieces fit together now. We want to cover these four kingdoms that are talked about in Daniel. I'm going to tie all of this stuff together. Okay, just hang on to your hat. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream and Daniel interpreted it. And we start here in chapter 2, verse 37. O king, art the king of kings, the God of heaven has given you the kingdom of power, strength, and glory. That was Babylon. And he was talking to Nebuchadnezzar, right? The verse 38, and the children of men dwell, and the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heavens have been given into thy hand, and they have made thee ruler over all of thee. This thou art the head of gold. So he's talking to Nebuchadnezzar and said, you are the head of gold. Then he goes on and he says, the next after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, which would have been I have this in the wrong place. This would have been the Medo-Persian Empire under Cyrus. So another kingdom will come up inferior to you, Babylon. And the third kingdom is of brass, which shall bear rule over the whole earth. That was Greece and Alexander the Great. And so then the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. We know that's Rome, and it breaks into pieces and subdues all things. So it's going to break down all the kingdoms. They're all going to go under world ruling government. It's going to be a Roman type government. Now, we need to talk about this just a second here. These are the four kingdoms, and I kept wondering why does the Father keep talking about four kingdoms? Because they're going to all play it out at the end time. They're going to all play out at the end time. So you had the kingdom of Babylon, you had the kingdom of Medo-Persia, you had the kingdom of Alexander the Great, and you had the kingdom of Rome. Does everybody understand those four? Now we're going to get to the next part. Now he's talking about, he's taken some of the qualities that he just covered and he's putting them in so that you can identify who the four kings are. And this is at the end time. Four kings come up at the end time. The first one is a lion and it has eagle's wings. And I beheld the wings were plucked off. That was talking about the American Revolution when we went to war with England. She was the lion. She has the symbol of the lion on her coat of arms. And the eagle's wings were plucked off. That's America. And she stood up on her feet, and she represents Babylon. So that first one that's a lion represents Babylon. Now, the way that I'm doing this is by going back to picking up pieces in Daniel 2 that we just covered. Now, verse 5, another beast, a second one was like a bear. He raised up on one side because he's got two parts to him. He's the Medo-Persian Empire, right? He would normally be considered the Medo-Persian Empire, except these are kings. These are taking the qualities of some of those. They're taking the qualities. They're taking the symbols and using them. That's what I'm trying to say. So who is the bear in our world today? Who has the symbol of the bear? Somebody talk to me. Bear?
That would be Russia.
That would be Russia. Russia's symbol is the bear. Her symbol is the bear. So she raises up on one side because the other side is China. She has three ribs in her mouth. That's Crimea, Ukraine, and eventually America. That's the three ribs she'll have in her mouth between her teeth, and she will devour much flesh. That's because she's going to bring a war. Now, normally you would think of this as Medo-Persia, except they're just taking qualities from these and they're saying it's a second king. So you had the first king, which was a lion. The second king is a bear. That would represent China and Russia because the symbol they use in their coat of arms is a bear. All right, now we get to the third one. which is verse 6. And behold, for lo, a leopard which had the back of 4 wings, and the beast had 4 heads. And so this is Alexander the Great. And his empire was the only one that was a world ruling empire. He was the only nation and only person who had ruled the whole world. And when he died, the empire was divided up into 4 parts, and each one of his generals took one of those 4 parts. And that's what it's talking about. The beast has 4 heads. Well, there's only one institution in this world that is a world ruling empire, just like Alexander, and that's the UN. Now, you could possibly say NATO is with them, but it's the UN. Okay, so the third one is talking about the UN. All right, the fourth one is going to be the BRIC, because it says, behold, the 4th beast is dread and terrible, great exceedingly. And we just read about it has 10 toes. We mentioned that, I think. It has 10 toes, and it has great iron teeth. So iron represented, remember, it's picking out some characteristics from these Daniel 2 kingdoms. Iron represented Rome. And that, I believe, right now is looking like the BRIC. Do y'all see that? See, it does have 10 horns. So that's what it's talking about here. So the 4th kingdom. So these are kings. Now, I want to go back up here to this one, which is Babylon. So right now, you would see that Trump is the ruler of our kingdom of Babylon. Babylon hasn't fallen yet, but she's in the process of falling. And so that would be Trump. Do y'all see some of these? The bear would be Putin. This is what we're talking about as far as leaders go. Now, now that the Father's laying a groundwork and he's trying to show you using symbols what's going to happen at the end time, which is about what I'm trying to cover. I'm going to cover this piece now. So now we understand who these players are, because between using Daniel 7 and Daniel 2, you know who the players are. You know who the players are. Now watch this. Now Daniel 8, it said, behold, I will make thee known what should be at the last end. That's our time. At the appointed time of the end shall be. Do y'all see that? And verse 20, Daniel 8, verse 20, the ram. Now he's now giving you another symbol, a ram. And he's telling you the ram, which thou saw had 2 horns, are the kings of Medo and Persia. So he just comes out and says it. It's Medo, Persia. So you know that's Iran and Iraq right now. So that kingdom was ran, if you remember, that kingdom of Medo, Persia was ran by Cyrus. So I'm just pointing this out as we're going through here. Now, the next kingdom he's going to talk about here is in 21, and the rough goat. Now, you have the ram, which is Medo, Persia, and you have the rough goat, who is the king of Greece. Going back to Alexander's kingdom, Alexander the Great was the world ruling government at that time. Today, that's the UN. Do y'all understand that the Father's using symbols to try to tell you who the people are? He's talking about the UN here, and he's talking about Alexander the Great. Now, so Alexander the Great was the goat, and the ram was Medo, Persia, and their king was Cyrus. Okay, so we're understanding these parts now. 22, and now being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation. So he's talking about here identifying Alexander the Great, because his kingdom got broken and it got divided into 4 parts. So he's trying to explain to you with history what these symbols mean. So the 4 parts were the 4 generals that the kingdom of Greece was divided into. Alexander's kingdom was divided into 4 parts. So you see, he's trying to identify this, but see, now he says at the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors come to full, a king of fierce counsel and understanding dark sentences shall stand up in Rome. Okay, so we don't know who that person is yet, but we will soon know, right? Now, I'm going to show you something in scripture about Cyrus, because Cyrus, remember, would have been the second kingdom. It represented the Medo-Persians, but he's not talking about at the end time Medo-Persia necessarily when he talks about Cyrus here. He's just telling you that there's going to be a person who plays the role of Cyrus, and he tells you who it is. Now look at this. Isaiah 44 verse 28, and that said of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, he shall perform my pleasure. I think that's Trump. I think that's exactly what you see going on right now. You see the Father's using all these characteristics to try to tell you what's going to happen at the end time. So he's telling you who Cyrus is, who he was at that time, and there's somebody going to play his role. Do y'all see that? He's laid all this groundwork so that you can understand the parts and the pieces, so that you're going to understand what's going to happen in Daniel 11, which is the climax, which is what we want to get to, because that's what has to be fulfilled at the end time. So, saying to Jerusalem, and we're a form of Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, make America great. Let's make America great again. We see that symbol all over the country. That's been his symbol, make America great. So he's saying, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. So he's laying a foundation for this nation. He's tearing down. You see that he's going in, cleaning house, just like spring cleaning. I couldn't help but notice this all in the same time frame, that all of these people are being fired and brought out of all of these, all of these agencies in Washington, right? I mean, that's what you see going on. So he's laying a foundation. Does everybody see that he's playing this role? Because it's a critical piece to be able to see it. Now, then it says he will also, verse 40, Isaiah 45, verse 1, he will be used to, he's God's anointed. He says, he is my anointed to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue the nations before him. So there's going to be some kind of battle where he subdues the nations. Do y'all see that? Now, going on, we're now going to get to the real story here. The real story is in Daniel 11. Now, he's gave you all these pieces. He's given you all these pieces. So now he's going to start putting this thing together in Daniel 11. Watch what he does. Now, verse 2. Now I'll show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up 3 kings with Persia. We know who Persia is. Persia is Iran. They tell you they're Persia. And the 4th one is richer than they all. That's Saudi Arabia. So you have 4 kings actually that's being talked about here with Saudi Arabia. And of his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up against the king of Grecia. Now remember, Greece played the role of the ram. He played Iran and the Arab nations here. That's what we're talking about here. These nations that are with Iran. And so this king, or these 3 kings, will actually stir up Greece. So Greece is, we're going to get to that next. Greece is a world ruling empire. Keep that in mind. Greece was the world ruling empire, which is the UN. Now, getting to the next verse, and a mighty king shall stand up, which at that time was Alexander the Great, because we're playing out, this actually is showing the fulfillment of Alexander the Great coming in and taking down all the nations in the Middle East and all of the world. So that's what that's referring to. A great king shall stand up. That is Alexander the Great. But I think at the end time, that's going to be Trump. Unless Trump dies and then it falls into Vance's ballpark. That he shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. That you've seen that happen this week. Trump went into the Middle East and said, we're just going to fence off Gaza, and we're not going to let anybody in there, and we're just going to restore it. So, I mean, who gave him the authority to do that? So he's taken the authority on himself, a great dominion to do according to his will. Now, going on, verse 4. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and divided into four winds of the heavens. That's talking about our country, right, in her war. And his dominion shall be ruled, and the four kingdoms shall be plucked up, even each other between these. So this is Alexander the Great. So this is talking about our kingdom, yes, in the future, but it's also talking about Alexander the Great here. When he stood up, the kingdom was broken. That was when Alexander died, and it was divided into the four winds, which were the four generals. Are y'all following me? So there's two things playing out here. The history that's happened when Greece came in and took over the Middle East, and what's going to happen in the future. So there's somebody else going to play the role of Alexander the Great that's going to go in there into the Middle East and do a war. I think that's going to be Trump. Now, verse 11, that war hasn't taken place yet. And I'm going to show you why. Verse 5, although she's been playing this war for 20 years, right? I mean, this war is a continuation, but there's one last war, I think, that still has to come. Verse 5, and the king of the south, which are these kings up here, the Persia and all the kings with Persia, which is Iran, said the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, and his dominion shall be great. So there's going to be a ruler come up among the king of the south, probably the ruler of probably Iran. Now, but now we get to the verse 6, and in the end of years, that's our time, they will join together. These nations right here, these Arab nations are going to join together, for the daughters of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. Trump is already over there trying to make an agreement. And she shall not retain her power of arms. She's not going to be given nuclear weapons. You see what I'm talking about here? Neither shall he stand or his arm. She shall be given up. That's the war that's going to take place. And they brought her and beget her, and she had strength in unto these. So really and truly is talking about that war that transpires in the Middle East. Now, it's laid the groundwork here. Now we're going to get to the war verses about the war. So he's laid the groundwork. He told you who the king of the south is. It's these Arab nations. He told you the king of the north is Alexander the Great, which is going to be the UN for us. Okay, now remember that when we have fought in the Middle East, it hasn't just been America that went in there to fight. She took the UN troops with her. She had troops from Russia, a few of them. She had troops from France, throughout Europe. And they all formed the UN troops, and they went into the Middle East. But America was the main source of the war. But she went in under the UN. Do y'all understand that? It's real important to know that, because otherwise you can't fulfill these verses, because it's the UN that goes in. But it's America that pretty much does everything. When she's part of the UN, she will go into those nations to fight. But she goes in under UN forces. Do y'all see that? Now, going on, here's the actual war. Daniel 11, verse 40, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south, which we know who that is now, that's the Arab countries, shall push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, chariots and ships and whatever, enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. Verse 41, she will enter into the glorious land, which is the land of Israel in the Middle East. That's what it's talking about here. And many nations shall overflow, and there shall escape out of her hand only Edom, which is Israel in the Middle East, some of them, not all of them, some of them are actually Judah, Moab, and Ammon, which is Jordan. Do y'all see that? So it's telling you which countries get taken down, which ones don't get taken down. This is the end time war. Now, verse 42, and he stretched forth his hand also to the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So going on, verse 43, they make some kind of financial deal. And then now look at this. Now watch this verse. And the tidings out of the east and out of the north. The tidings out of the east is China. The tidings out of the north is Russia. Shall trouble him. This man that goes into the Middle East to cause a war in the Middle East. He's going to stir up China and Russia. Do y'all see that? Going to the last verse. This is going to tell you, this tells you everything right here. This verse tells you everything. It tells you who the players are right here. If you have any doubts, you're not going to be able to get around these verses. Now, verse 45, and he shall plant the tabernacle of his palace between the seas and the holy, glorious, holy mountain. Between the seas, that's the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. He goes back to his home between the seas. Do y'all see what it says here? Israel in the Middle East doesn't have two seas around her. She doesn't have two seas. Let me say it one more time. She doesn't have two seas around her. This can't be talking about Israel in the Middle East. And she is being called the glorious holy mountain. This place that has two seas around her is called the glorious holy mountain. That is America. So that tells you right there that it's America that goes in with the UN forces and they're going to fight a battle. Now, it's possible that he's referring to all these wars that have happened in the last 20 years, except it sounds like it's a man that goes into the Middle East, fights a war, then comes back home. Do y'all see that? Because see, the Father has put all that symbolism together so we can understand the book of Daniel at the end time. That somebody's going to go in the Middle East, somebody's going to fight a war. It's going to stir up China and Russia. And, you know, I think the next verse actually tells you even more because it tells you he comes, no, here it is. He shall come to his end and none shall help him. That's the fall of America. But he will pull the UN troops into this. He will pull the UN troops because it's got to be, it has to be the UN because it keeps talking about Greece and it keeps talking about Alexander the Great, which is UN forces. That has to be UN forces. It can't be anybody but that. Do y'all see that? Because what I tried to do was go through and show you the Father is using all these symbols and all these nations and showing you the symbolism so he can tell you who is playing the role at the end time, because there are roles being played. And that's throughout Scripture, roles are being played.